Thank you. Well, this is the second time we've had a Bell Sunday here at St John's, and I was going to do a recap on what we talked about last year and what we learnt. And then I thought, well, if I do a recap, then you're just going to find out what I know, and I want to find out what you know. So, I thought it would be good if we had a quiz, and we would go over some of the things I talked about last year. So, the congregation, I'm going to divide you in half. It won't be painful. This half, you're going to be called Ding. Right? So, you are Ding. John, can you write Ding there for me, please? John is my glamorous assistant for the morning. Just write it here. Ding there, please. Oh, I see. Yes. Put Ding there then. And this team, you're going to be called... They're good, they are. You're up against it. You're up against it. Right, so when I ask a question and you give the answer, you need to say dong as you call out your answer, obviously. Now, this team, you need to call out... They're good, they are. Could you write that? Ding and dong. Well done. So, first question. Question number 1. We'll go to Ding. Who invented the bell? Who wasn't listening last year? The Chinese, yes, that invented in China. So 1 point. Did you shout out Ding? Oh, yeah. Did he shout out Ding? Question 2. Over to Dong. How many thousands of years ago were bells invented? No, not the 9th century. Over to Ding, they might steal now. Over to Ding, can you remember how many thousands of years ago that bells were invented in China? 5,000, but you didn't say Ding. Oh, did you? So Dong haven't schooled yet. What material were oh, it's to Ding. Ding, what material were the first bells made from? Did you call it? Did you say Ding? I don't think you did. Don't. Or what did you say? Clay. They were made out of terracotta. I'll give you clay. Yes. Ding. You can go home after this and say, oh, there was a right ding-dong in church this morning. Dong. Who were the people responsible for bringing bells to Europe? From China? From Asia? Can't hear you, Yoke. You're dinging when you're donging. This is what we have up here in the chat. Shout it out. Shout your socks off. No, it wasn't traders. It was priests. Can't give you that. Should have offered it as a steal over here, really, but... Not very high scoring with the dong loss, is it? Question 3, over to Ding. How do English bells differ from bells in the rest of the world? Most of the bells. Come on, I've told you this. Nobody on Ding. Yes. The bells are attached to a wheel. You can't see that wheel. That wheel is high up. Noel, in fact, if you'd like to, Noel will give you a tour of the tower so you can see the bells. Not today, because he's on coffee duty. But if you want to talk to him about the bells, then he'd be more than happy to have a distraction from washing the dishes. So, have Dong scored yet? Right. How many bells do we have here at St John's that we ring full circle? 8. He did say dong. Give him a point. Give him a point. Hey, hey, hey. Wouldn't that be horrible to be on 0 points? Over here to ding. Where did St John's bells originally come from? Yes? Correct. St Mary's at Lambeth. Well done. Very high scoring over here, aren't we? Question over here to Dong. How old is the oldest bell? Come on, I only told you this in March.
Dong 300.
Yes, well done, Susan. Give him. That was a very loud dong, I have to say, at the back there. Over to Ding. Who is the patron saint of bell ringers? You're correct. Yeah, he did ding. I heard him ding. And finally, the last question is, when is St Dunstan's feast day?
Dong last Sunday.
Come on, I need a date here.
18th.
It is actually the 19th of May, so it was last Monday. So that's why we're celebrating St Dunstan's life today. I did lure you here under false pretenses. How many have we got? Well, I think, 2 for Dong and 6. I was a bit harsh, wasn't I? Well done. Congratulations to Ding. Now, come back next year and we will do Bell Ringers Bingo. And you have got to be in it to win it. Well, I tell you, there will be a prize. That will be a free tour of the belfry given by Noel later on. But we need to talk about St Dunstan, really, and why it was important. I do feel I've lured you here under false pretences because I did promise tales of debauchery, and that's not going to happen. I'm sorry. I want to talk to you about the life and the work of St Dunstan. Why is the patron saint of bell ringers? And actually, this is when two worlds collide, really. The world of bell ringing and the world of the church, if you like. St Dunstan was born during the reign of King Athelstan. King Athelstan was the first king of united England. He had combined all the kingdoms, the English kingdoms, and we had one united kingdom of Athelstan. He'd driven the Vikings out in the north and the Danes out in the south. So when Dunstan was born in 909, it actually was a period of stability in English history. He is born to wealthy parents in Estrin and Herrestan, and just outside Glastonbury, and he was educated by Irish monks who lived in the ruins of Glastonbury Abbey. He was a very able student and learned many crafts, music, art, and he was eventually brought to the court of King Athelstan. And while he was there, he developed his learning still further, more art, more craft, more skills, more scripture. And unfortunately, because of this, sometimes this happens with gifted people, they tend to develop enemies. People are jealous or frightened of what they can achieve. And because of this jealousy, his enemies plotted against him. And they told Athelstan, King Athelstan, that Dunstan was practicing witchcraft. Athelstan was furious and threw Dunstan out of the royal court. As he was leaving, he was ambushed by his enemies, who beat him up very badly and then threw him in a cesspit and left him to drown. Remarkably, he escaped, and he sought sanctuary with his uncle, who was the Bishop of Winchester. As I said, he came from a very wealthy family. One was the Bishop of Winchester, the other was the Bishop of Lichfield. He forewent, if you like. He left all his trappings behind to live a very pious life. When he was eventually he made his way to Glastonbury. He was very ill, and once he recovered from his illness, he decided that he would take monastic orders. He built a hermitage at the side of St Mary's at Glastonbury. It was actually only 5 feet by 2.5 feet. What a tiny space to live in. But there he further worked on his skills, craftsmanship. He became a blacksmith, a goldsmith. He was an artist, a painter. He wrote hymns. I tried to find some hymns, actually, that he'd written, and some of them, it's not known exactly that they were attributed to him. But he was a very, very able man. It's while he was living in the hermitage, working at his blacksmith's forge, that one of the many myths or legends arose about St Dunstan. And this particular one, I'm going to tell you now, still resonates today. We still, although many of us, and I didn't realise, were actually linked to St Dunstan, is something that's fairly common that we still use today. St Dunstan was working at his forge, and an elderly man came in and said he wanted a chalice to be made, and Dunstan stepped to work on this chalice. But out of the corner of his eye, he noticed that this person was changing shape and was actually no longer an elderly man, but became a woman and a young boy. And Dunstan realised that this was the devil and was trying to tempt him. And so he quickly turned round. I'm telling you the wrong legend here. He quickly turned round, grabbed the devil by the nose with the red hot pincers and threw the devil out. And so there is the tale, a rhyme that says, St Dunstan, so the story goes, once pinched the devil by the nose with red-hot tongues that made him roar, that he could be heard 3 miles or more. That wasn't the legend I wanted to tell you. I wanted to tell you about the legend of the young, beautiful woman that came into the forge, limping, needed a shoe. And so this young woman, a seductress, asked Dunstan to make a shoe, and St Dunstan turned to the forge and noticed the cloven hoof of the devil below these glorious robes. And so St Dunstan very quickly grabbed the horseshoe, the red-hot horseshoe, and nailed it onto the cloven hoof of the devil. The devil ran screaming around, begging Dunstan to take the horseshoe off. Dunstan refused until the devil agreed that wherever the symbol of the horseshoe was, he would not enter. And then very often you'll see horseshoes over barns and things like that, over places. The devil had to respect the horseshoe. We give horseshoes, lucky horseshoes, at weddings, don't we? Yes. Horseshoes are a symbol of good luck, keep out evil. I was given a horseshoe on my wedding day, and it seems to have worked for me. I haven't been tempted, still with my husband. So, yeah, that's all down to the horseshoe. So we still, as a symbol, we still use today, and that goes right back to St Dunstan, the myth of St Dunstan. So St Dunstan is, while he's there working on metals, blacksmithing, he actually then starts experimenting with bells, bell metal, bell shape, bell design, and actually that image is from a 12th century manuscript which is kept at in the British Library, and I've actually drawn Dunstan with a making a bell profile and the composition of bell metal. So that's how I've depicted him. However, St Dunstan is remarkable that we actually know what St Dunstan looked like, and he didn't look anything like that. He's actually, I've done him in very fine robes there, like the 12th century manuscript. We actually have a self-portrait of Dunstan. In the Bodleian Library in Oxford, there is a manuscript, and within that, the leaf in that manuscript, there is a drawing of Christ seated in the throne, and at the foot of Christ is somebody kneeling, a monk kneeling at the feet of Christ. He's got his eyes shielded like that from the glory of the Lord. And next to it, he's written in Latin, this is all his own drawing, beautifully drawn, "Merciful Christ, I ask you to defend me, Dunstan, that you may not permit the storms of the underworld to swallow me." So that's written in Dunstan's own hand. So we do know what he looked like. And actually, other medieval saints, we have no idea what they look like. So I thought that was quite interesting. When Athelstan died, King Athelstan, in 939, King Edmund succeeded him, and Dunstan became abbot at Glastonbury. Unfortunately, there was a very quick turnover of kings, and Edmund was assassinated after only a few years. Edred then took control, and Dunstan was one of Edred's most trusted ministers. When Edred died, his teenage son took over, Edwig, who did not get on at all with Dunstan. They clashed, and Dunstan was exiled and went to the continent. When he was on the continent, living a very frugal life, he contemplated what he could do to reform the church, reform the monasteries, and reform the state. And so he was in exile for a few years until Edred died. And the young King Edgar became king. Edgar was only 15 years old, but a very, very pious young man, very forward-thinking. He brought St Dunstan back. Dunstan was then, he wasn't a saint yet. He brought Dunstan back from the continent, and he and Dunstan together began reforming the church and reforming the monasteries, upset a lot of people. He wanted the clergy to live a more frugal life, a more aesthetic life. Dunstan ensured that parish priests were better educated, and also he set in motion that parish priests would educate the parishioners in valuable trades. So he was very much about reform and education. When Edgar came to power in 959, he didn't have a coronation, and he wanted to wait until there was greater stability in the country, till the Vikings had settled down in the north. He and Dunstan deployed an army to the north to keep the Vikings out. Down the south, they sent the fleet, the navy, to protect the coast. So this was actually the glory, golden years of Anglo-Saxon history, was this 16 years when Edgar was reigning. He didn't have a coronation, and he waited until the country was more settled, and that was in 973. And that's important because the coronation, the liturgy of the coronation, the prayers that Dunstan wrote himself, those prayers that were said in 973 were said for every subsequent coronation since. They were said at the coronation of Queen Elizabeth, and 2 years ago, that's 1,050 years ago, they were said at the coronation of King Charles. And I'll read that prayer now, which the Archbishop of Canterbury says immediately after he anoints the king with oil. Stand firm and hold fast from henceforth this seat of royal dignity, which is yours by the authority of Almighty God. May that same God, whose throne endures forever, establish your throne in righteousness, that it may stand fast forever. And it seems to me that, you know, Dunstan, with his the things that he's brought to the church, the world of bell ringing, that we still have a connection with him through the prayers that he wrote for the coronation, and also for the horseshoe, the myth of the horseshoe. Unfortunately, Edgar died when he was only 30, so that glorious golden era in Anglo-Saxon history only lasted 15 years. After that, he suddenly died, and his eldest son, who was only 12, Edward, was crowned. But that only lasted 3 years. Edward went to visit his half-brother, Ethelred. And while he was there, he was murdered by Ethelred, and Ethelred became king, Ethelred the Unready. And so Dunstan found himself again performing another coronation, more duties, more prayers, but he took the opportunity after that coronation prayer to rebuke Ethelred for murdering his brother. Dunstan then spent the last 10 years away from court. He was no longer welcome, and he lived the last 10 years of his life at Canterbury Abbey, Canterbury Cathedral, where he's got there is a shrine next to the altar, on the right-hand side of the altar, and that was for 200 years the most popular pilgrimage centre to visit in England. He was canonised 20 years after he died, and that's the story of St Dunstan. So I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope you haven't been too disappointed not hearing tales of drunken bell ringers, and you'll go away knowing a little bit more about bell ringing. Noel, our tower captain, is very happy to talk to you about bells, and there are leaflets at the back for you to take away, and also to sign up. There's a form to sign, is there not, Noel? Form to sign in so that you can fill in your name and contact details if you'd like to ring. You don't need to be big and strong to ring, I'm not, but it's a great source of enjoyment and social side of bell ringing is very important. So do please consider it. It'd be lovely to have you join us as a member of the tower. And that's it, Jamie. Okay. Thank you.